who has joined us today in the Mountain Lakes campus of University of South Australia. And also, good evening or good night to all the people watching us online around the globe. Welcome you all to the presentations of the team projects of International Space University Southern Hemisphere Space Studies Program. I am Göktuğ Karacaloğlu, the Program Director of SHSSP20, and it is my pleasure today to be the Master of Ceremony for this very prestigious and exciting event for us. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the Ghana people who are the traditional custodians of this land. We send our respect to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and also want to extend our respect to all the other Aboriginal people living on this land. It was only 5 weeks ago, ladies and gentlemen, only 5 weeks ago, that we had this amazing class of 53 participants representing 14 nationalities who joined us in Adelaide. We had a very rigorous program for them. In the first couple of weeks, we started with many core lectures. They had many hands-on and international and also interdisciplinary activities. And also we had many public events. I'm sure some of you had also joined us during this course. And for the last 2 weeks, these great team have been working on 2 different team projects, as we call them. So we asked them to divide themselves on their choice to pick one of the 2 team projects that we gave as an option, a very interdisciplinary 2 team projects. And then since 2 weeks, they have been working, I should probably say 24/7 on these team projects. So well done. So today we will be listening to the presentations, but before that, I would like to also acknowledge their efforts because this is not the only deliverable that we had from them. As you see in my hand, in the last 2 weeks, these 2 teams have come up with 2 separate reports. So each team had a 50-page report, which details all their findings, as well as a 8-page executive summary. And today, this is their final deliverable, which is the presentation of their findings. And they will basically present their findings to our distinguished panel of experts, as well as their peer teams, and also all the audience in here, and also watching us online around the globe. In SHSSP curriculum, as you also, majority of you know, we keep it very, we give a lot of importance to the communication aspect of space. So it's not only technical. We don't want to stay in a technical aspects. So this is why we always talk about storytelling aspects, and this is part of our curriculum in the lectures as well. And this very exercise is actually a very good demonstration of what we taught them, and we will basically hear back from them how their stories are told today. So today the presentations, therefore, you will hear will be much different than probably you would expect on an academic setting or any other academic conference. So we explicitly asked them to put into effort to think about how to better tell their stories. So they were free to use media aspects. They were free to act on the stage, as you possibly noticed. There will be some acting coming in. So the main message is how you can best get your message across to the audience. You are free. So therefore, you will enjoy this academic theaters today, but if you have any particular technical questions, as I said, you can always go back to the reports or executive summaries because it's not possible to talk about all these technical details in such a setting. So in today's schedule, we will start with the first team project, which is called the Access to Space in the Southern Hemisphere. Each team will have 50 minutes of time to present. And then we will have a 30-minute allocation for our adjudicators panel to ask questions and have discussions. If we have time within this slot, we will also have the opportunity to get more questions from the audience. And also we can get, again, if we have time, from online. So anyone who are watching us online, you can ask your questions on the chat channel, in our YouTube channel. So we will have the opportunity to ask your questions across as well. So after this entire setting of 50 plus 30 minutes, we will have a 30-minute break, and then we will convene again around 10:50, maybe 11 Adelaide time, and then we will start the second presentation, exactly the same setting on lunar farming. Finally, before I hand over to Mike, to our first team, I would like to acknowledge and individually thank for our adjudicators panel to be here with us. And I would like to introduce them. Today with us we have Andy Thomas, the Australian astronaut. We have Sarah Barker from the Department of Education. We have Sumen Rai from Defence SA. We have Lloyd Demp from Southern Launch. We have Darren Lovett from SA Government. We have John Culton from University of Adelaide, and we have John Hisco from Department of Education. So without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce the chair of the first team project Access to Space in the Southern Hemisphere, Jan Walter Schroeder.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Goktu. Yes, I also would like to welcome our appreciated jury members and guests today, as well as the people joining us in the live stream. So I was the chair of the team project Access to Space in the Southern Hemisphere. I was supported by Scott, Eamon and Mina. Thanks a lot. I'm very grateful that I could be part of this team of 26 very smart and dedicated individuals working on a very interesting topic. So they have worked very hard in the last couple of weeks. They did literature review, they analyzed a lot of data, and they also talked to several experts. And some of those experts joined in person, some of them remotely. So I brought, talking about remotely, I brought a remote control today. So wonder what that could be for, you might wonder. Well, the team project had to give those deliverables, the final report as well as the executive summary that some of the audience now has in their hands already. But in addition to that, the team has chosen to use the format of a TV show to present their final results and the outcome of their work. So when I press this button here, the team will show, you will see the mission statement, and then the show will start. So I invite you to sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
To explore and assess the implementation of new space access for the Southern Hemisphere by evaluating strategic, economic, political and environmental factors to inform government and commercial decision-making.
These outlines are available on page 3 of the executive summary for the audience here today. We will also have commercials reminiscing our time here at the ISU in between the live segments, as well as 2 pre-recorded fake pictures which are for comic relief purposes only. But first, please welcome our space tank judges with a round of applause. We have Huang Xing from China, Sujit from India, Guy Marcus from Israel, and myself, Anu, from Australia. Remember, sharks, we are here today to find a way to implement access to space for the benefit of the Southern Hemisphere as a whole. The ideas we hear today need to provide economic development, environmental monitoring, international relations, increase independence of the states in the Southern Hemisphere, and increase resilience. The very end of our presentation, after question time, ends quite dramatically to provide an interlude for the lunar farming project. Please remain in your seats unless advised otherwise. So without further ado, let's have our first pitch from Luca and Celie on nations pursuing access to space independently.
Good morning, judges. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to be here today.
Good morning. Today's space tank will be devoted to the Southern Hemisphere's access to space. Ventures being presented have to be extremely innovative and convincing because we have 3 ideas pitching on our time and the clock is ticking. So let's get the show on the road.
What we will do now is listen to all of the proposals, make some questions about them, and then make a decision on what is the best option to invest.
Thank you. We did the research, we identified the needs and benefits for states to access space. We believe that the countries of the Southern Hemisphere that want to develop space capabilities should do that independently and separately.
Okay, it's a good point to start. Thank you.
Now, we have some questions for you before considering whether we are going to invest in this. So, did you use any methodology to analyze this scenario?
Yes, we do. So we analyze the ability to access space for each scenarios, considering political, economic, and strategic, and also the environmental factors. And then 5 items has been identified with the SWOT methodologies. And at the end, a numerical evaluations of each scenarios has been performed.
Okay, I'd like to hear more about how your research was performed. Were there certain aspects of access to space which you focused on in particular?
Yes, thank you for this question. In order to provide a comprehensive view, we split it up into 4 research groups. We focused on economics, government, environment, and strategy.
So, I understand that each nation in the Southern Hemisphere pursues access to space on its own. Does that mean that each state will have to develop sovereign capability in each of the areas required for space access? For example, its own launch facility and launch vehicles?
Not necessarily. So each state will either develop sovereign capabilities in each of the areas or engage in international agreement for those capabilities that they decided not to develop locally.
Okay, I'm seeing some red flags here. Do you see a problem for the proposition for separate access to space causing tensions between neighboring countries? Did you factor in creating state seclusion rather than unity into your risk matrix?
So it might be create some competition or confrontations between countries over issues, such as the launch windows, the space orbit, and frequency allocations, and also the ground segment.
Yes, however, another way to look at this is that enhanced competition drives innovation and technological advancement. This affects the whole industry and the whole nation. The national GDP will increase and it will be beneficial for the country.
Okay, I'm going to drop 100 million credits on this one for 10% stake.
100 million credits for only 10%? Come on. I'm also out because firstly, space is a frontier for unity. That is the future for humanity, not seclusion. Secondly, launch sites in every nation will cause so much disruption for global shipping and air traffic. I want my online shopping time.
My offer is still on the table.
I'm out. Your idea has a large weakness in that it could lead to duplication and underutilization of facilities.
To me, it actually sounds interesting, but not for 100 million credits.
But we can't give you more than 5%. Sorry.
Oh, in that case, I'm also out.
Okay, thank you.
Next. Thank you for coming. Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you. Good luck.
While we give the next presenters some time to get their prompts ready, let's have a look at a fake pitch which proposed using volcanic propulsion to venture into space.
What we're proposing is a collaboration between ring and fire countries to make technology and utilise volcanoes as pressure chambers to launch rockets into space.
Look, I'm going to make you an offer right now to buy 100% of your company from you. Come here. I'm going to give you $1 for this whole idea just so that I can throw it in the bin.
Sure, but here's the best part. It involves making tunnels between the volcanoes to make sustainable supply of heat to raise the reservoir temperature. All the countries that are involved in this consortium have the right to use the facility and will be waived from any export control restrictions that are imposed by the participating countries.
The countries will also be waived from third-party liability damage that might occur within the region. The facility will have architectural design that represents each country. We have modelled our proposal on the International Space University and believe that this project is truly intercultural, international and interdisciplinary.
Stop it there. We've heard enough. Are you planning sustainable access to space or a major catastrophic event that will eradicate humanity from Earth?
Cool.
That was interesting. I admire their ambition and creative process, but it's a shame that their idea was lunacy. We also have created a commercial for Awesome Lakes Hotel, where we've been staying and eating while attending the ISU's Southern Hemisphere Space Program. Let's cut to the commercial now.
Good morning and welcome to the Awesome Lakes Hotel. As you can see, we have a huge restaurant area, so we can accommodate some of the most genius customers from all over the world, like astronauts, NASA scientists, directors of space agencies.
931!
Need a nap after lunch or want to have a catch night? What's the problem? We have hundreds of rooms ready for that. You can relax and sunbathe on the balcony.
Does anyone have 931?
Our special and permanent meals gave us the important role to satisfy the stomach's necessities of Awesome Lakes. Also because we are the only restaurant around here. But never mind, come visit us to taste one of the most wonderful flavors of Australia.
Okay, welcome back to live segment of Space Tank.
Our next pitchers, Christian and Noon, will propose a public-private partnership between startups and governments. Let's give them a round of applause.
Good morning, judges and audience. Thank you so much for having us here today. We have an amazing idea to propose to you today.
Yeah, we're an international new space startup company that aims to form an entity between governments in the Southern Hemisphere and private new space companies in order to facilitate space access in the Southern Hemisphere. All participating countries would bundle their space activities in this giant international public-private partnership, We call it the Southern Hemisphere Space Mega Company.
I want to know, what is the advantage of this scenario from a business point of view?
The economic principle will be the main driver of the international PPP, and also infrastructure will be built where it makes the most business sense.
Agree.
Also, the cost will drive the operation of the PPP. It will bring the high efficiency access to space.
You mentioned a notion of international PPP. Can you please elaborate what PPP is and what does it mean?
Yes, great question. PPP stands for Public-Private Partnership and is a joint venture arrangement between public and the private sector, typically of a long-term nature. It combines the benefits of government can provide, such as financial security and planning, to promote investment, as well as the cost efficiencies, innovation, and expertise of the private sector.
Okay, how will you create a company attitude to facilitate space access in Southern Hemisphere countries, such as Australia?
Well, in the case of Australia, we plan to capitalize on the geographic advantages. It has an excellent opportunity in the north for the equatorial delivery, as well as the excellent opportunity in the southern part of the continent for the polar orbit delivery.
Yes, so that will include both launch and ground station communication capability, and we'll be able to provide these services to various clients in both the public and private sector, including governments, universities, etc., and also, of course, new space companies. And the examples of such services would also be satellite payload integration and satellite bus design.
Do you see any difficulties in running this public-private partnership scheme?
There may be a difference between public and private interests, such as a strategic driver. The government are sensitive in the changing political winds, and business is driven fundamentally by their respective bottom line. Also, the initial setup period will take longer due to find the right balance.
Yeah, that's right. But we also believe that once a common ground is found, the PPP model will provide the greatest benefit to all parties, including the people of the countries that follow this model and participate in this.
Okay, I kind of like this idea, but I want to know if you considered the impact on other business sectors of a state at all. What are the advantages and disadvantages on the various industries which are affected?
Our approach will not only encourage growth of the commercial space industry and directly relevant business, it will affect the difference of the new technology and also the opportunity, such as infrastructure and finance.
Yep. And additionally, the countries that embrace all these opportunities will benefit from tax revenue growth, employment growth, and promote other countries to participate in this framework. Finally, history has shown that space technologies have in the past produced far greater benefits to humanity than was ever initially thought.
You're saying all the right things, but judges, I think it's time to decide whether we have a pitch worth pursuing here.
Oh, I'm actually not sure. Let's ask for the opinion of the audience for this one.
So everyone in the audience, please raise your blue paper if you like the idea, or the red paper if you didn't like it.
So it's blue if it's a go, and it's red if it's a no.
I think we are far from consensus here. I would like to comment that for this proposal, there is a major risk of losing significant taxpayers' funding.
That's right.
Honestly, I thought your idea is weak because there is a confluence between the private and the public attitudes. That will call be the breakdown.
That's right.
I'm sorry, but it's a no from us. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Hey guys, do you remember that ridiculous proposal with the dolphins flying into space?
Oh yeah, vaguely.
They should have been locked up in prison, but their methodology was actually really great. Let's take a look.
Hello, we would like to propose our idea to the development sustainable access to space. The idea is to let the dolphin build a rocket and review the Sea Launch project. They have a good understanding of the aerodynamic aspect of the rocket and will provide us with their culture touch on the rocket design.
That's right. And then we just let hundreds of dolphins pull the rocket. Imagine a chariot flying into space, but with dolphins. You know, like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Humanity will also be helping our dolphin friends by creating a perimeter that protects the sea launch territory from any unnatural adversaries that might endanger the dolphin population, like evil sharks.
I don't think so.
At first, this method might seem a bit out there. We can guarantee we have a thorough research this approach. We have used the 4 main research methods to analyze it.
We have completed a comprehensive literature review comprising over 100 sources. We have carried out qualitative interviews of more than 15 government and private industry experts regarding access to space from the Southern Hemisphere. We also conducted a SWOT analysis for multiple access to space scenarios. And finally, to ensure the integrity of our results, we conducted a market research survey that involved surveying the surveys. Due to time restrictions, we couldn't survey the survey that surveyed the survey.
Stop this madness.
Hell no.
Are you out of your mind?
Yes.
When the animal rights activists get involved in this, you will be going to prison.
Even though the dolphin idea is ridiculous, I was really impressed by their methods and tools and the way they work together. They took the problem very seriously. They started with a comprehensive literature review in 4 different areas. Back then, they allocated their entire research department comprised of 26 researchers just for the space study. The SWOT analysis and the market survey were an important part of their research. They even conducted qualitative interviews of experts from both government and industry. Even though the idea of using dolphins to access space is absurd, the way they made their way to get there was nonetheless impressive. We also have an infomercial for new space ventures. Let's cut to the ads.
You struggle to find your way without your GPS? Are you sick of telecommunications failures? Stop relying on other
satellite networks. Launch now from exclusive Australian launch sites. We offer huge benefits due to Australia's unique isolated location, not to mention the country is huge. Launch from the north or launch from the south, we can do it all. Got problems with pesky ships getting in the way of your launch? Too many people living near your launch site? Come to South Australia. The first 50 callers will receive a free CubeSat with their launch. But wait, there's more. Call now and receive a 0.0000% discount on your insurance cost. We'll even include a free week of rent for your stay. That's right, call 1-800-LAUNCH now.
Note, we cannot actually guarantee any launch sites in Australia are currently available.
Welcome back. Let's get a round of applause for our final pitch on facilitating access to space in the Southern Hemisphere, where we'll now look to an international collaboration framework presented by Na and Stephen.
Good morning and welcome back to the live segment of Space Tank.
Good morning, judges. Thank you.
So, this is our final proposal. We've heard the other pitchers, and each have had some good points for the Southern Hemisphere's access to space, except of course for the dolphins and the volcanoes, which seriously defied the laws of physics.
Okay, Stephen, now, what's your idea and why would you be interested in it?
It's a great question. Our idea is having an international collaborative state-based framework, most likely facilitated by the by a treaty to which states of the Southern Hemisphere may become a member. This will increase our chances of success because we'll have the benefit of many nations working together for a common goal.
We will be sharing potential risks and costs to ensure that the member states are strong, resilient, and sustainable in the long term.
Let us see what they are going to explain.
Also, each member state can decide how they best fit into this framework and work their way in based on their own needs.
Each nation can determine its own future in this model based on their strengths and weaknesses. It might be launch vehicles or ground stations or something altogether new and innovative.
Fundamental to this idea is that there will be several states within the framework that are designated as launch states, and they would have private new space companies providing launch access for everyone within the framework, potentially providing priority access or discounted launch services to companies and states within the framework. This will help to facilitate reliable, efficient, and effective access to space for the entire Southern Hemisphere, or at least those members that are part of the framework.
This sounds really good. I like the international treaty approach because, it allows nations to achieve space-related activities in areas where they are the best.
So you are the only group that has developed this idea to create this sort of international relation between nations.
I love the idea. But before I can put my money where my mouth is, I need more info. Which opportunities have you identified from the international collaborative state-based framework would benefit the whole Southern Hemisphere as an entirety?
Our model is not limited to the Southern Hemisphere. Strategic relationships with the Northern Hemisphere would play a significant role, as they have established business and experience. We aim to provide incentive to the whole world that can benefit the Southern Hemisphere.
Furthermore, we aim to bring the Southern Hemisphere together, to tap into both the known and currently unknown advantages. We already know that we can be competitive in equatorial, polar, and sun-synchronous orbits.
Our approach allows consolidation of space industry standards for the Southern Hemisphere, improved space debris management, and eco-political cohesion.
Okay, all very good points, but how do you determine which countries are suitable to launch, and which facts do you consider?
An excellent question. The four main factors that we considered were a country's geography, its meteorology, weather events, its infrastructure, existing infrastructure, and the political stability of the country.
Why geographical location? How does that affect the suitability of a country to launch?
Geographical location of a country plays a very important role in the types of launch that it can facilitate, cost efficiency of those launches, risks to neighbouring states, and those sort of factors. Where a launch facility is based has a direct impact on how much fuel is required by the launch vehicle to get into orbit, both in altitude and the type of orbit. For example, the closer you are to the equator, the more efficient your launch vehicle can be.
That's right. For example, some countries may lie on the equator, which minimize fuel consumption to get to an equatorial orbit, which is where most satellites currently reside. However, to take advantage of equatorial launch, the ideal direction for the rocket is to the east.
Some countries lying close to the equator have geopolitical complications due to both the direction that they would ideally launch to minimise propellant costs and the risks to neighbouring nations. For example, launching east over another nation and having the rocket stages fall down into that country may cause some issues. Therefore, the ideal launch location would be one where there is no risk to neighbouring countries on the ideal launch path.
The polar and sun-synchronous orbits have also been considered for different reasons, and for this, the preferred geographic location are in general nations that can launch south and have no countries further south. There are many other considerations to take into account, such as risk to oceanic oil rigs lying within the flight path, but you get the picture.
Okay, but why did you consider only 4 factors?
We considered many variables. Due to time constraints, we focused on these 3 elements. In reality, we had a research group of 26 professionals from 9 countries who met for the purpose of this study, and we only had 2 intensive weeks to deliver, much of which was dedicated to other simultaneous activities.
What we are offering is a starting point based on our research. Our hope is that we have inspired you enough, excited you enough to take this journey with us. Humanity, including the dolphins, depends on.
Okay, listen, I think you're missing an important point about this international kind of collaboration. Is this a form of a treaty or some other kind of arrangement?
We have not spent effort on what it should be called. The point is that it's an agreement between nations in order to take advantage of the Southern Hemisphere as an access to a space capability for the mutual benefit of all parties.
I think that's fine. We can hash out the details later on. But let's finish up with our questions, judges, so we can get to making offers.
So a treaty is fine if everyone gets along, but what if something goes wrong? For example, a launch failure or a damage caused by space activities.
Well, firstly, in our proposal, this model needs to operate with international treaties and principles, such as those of the Outer Space Treaty and the Liability Convention. Through such existing agreements, it's clear that responsibility is within the launching state and then to the national space law of that nation should such an event occur.
Okay, I can see the judges are excited by this proposal. So let's take a break, and when we come back, we will see if we can get a deal here. Yeah.
The next commercial is dedicated to the lectures we had by present NASA Chief Scientist Jim Green about moving to Saturn's moon Titan before Earth moves out of the habitable zone. Let's take a look.
在泰坦星上潜水，这是太阳系中观看土星的最佳视角。在一氧化氮的环境里，你会哈哈大笑一整天。我们甚至会把你升级到头等舱。如果你买一个舱位，我们将免费赠送你一个舱位。我们为你准备了合适一家人的舱位。 因为你已经将生死抛在了脑后，每人只需要10万元，不能再做恐龙了。现在就开始你的泰坦星之旅吧，不要错过我们提供的各种太空旅游机会。当然了，也包括现在从澳大利亚南部海岸起飞的惊险刺激的亚轨道飞行旅行。
Well, it seems that our judges are almost ready to make a decision. But before we get to that, let's hear from our experts from around the world on their thoughts about this opportunity.
From experts around the world, we would like to hear more about their opinion. Let's start with an expert from China. Hi, Dr. Sean. It's a pleasure to have you with us. After watching the different scenarios that the patients have presented, what do you think?
Hi, Ms. Noon, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here. Where all these 3 scenarios had the very solid arguments to back up each proposal. So in my opinion, it is difficult to unite all the Southern Hemisphere nations since you need to have a strong political willingness, and sometimes it is really hard to achieve from certain countries. So in my opinion, the best option was the first one because it doesn't require a multinational agreement for every space activity, but only when needed. And the states can use their own infrastructure to run the program. So let's use Australia as an example. Shipping of launch vehicles to Australia could be taken a long time if it is transported by ship. Implementing an aircraft runway may elevate this issue by allowing rapid air flights transfer directly to the launch facility. Also, I have noticed that Australia is aiming for a new space market. As the new space market matures, it will be heavily driven by smaller sized satellites with cheaper and faster access to space. As such, the integration facility needs to be accommodate corresponding scales of operation to integrate satellites with the launch vehicle, integration facilities for rockets and satellites including clean rooms, fueling stations and storage rooms, which are likely to be similar in size when compared to traditional launch facilities. So this will allow the launch facility to handle more satellites at the same time and reduce the time to orbit for the satellites.
Thank you, Dr. Sean. After this, we will go to the noon to interview our experts from Germany. Professor Walter, thank you for being with us at midnight in Germany. Did you have a chance to watch the space tank presentation?
Ja, vor allem die Delfine und Vulkane waren echt klasse.
Can you please answer in English, please?
Yeah, sure, sorry. So I really enjoyed it, and especially the dolphins and the volcano ones.
Okay, can you give us your opinion on the proposals?
Yeah, so I'm really interested in the second scenario, where there is international collaboration between private companies and the government. It gives the opportunity of various international private entities to invest in the project. So that will bring sufficient capital to realize the scenario. In my opinion, one of the biggest challenges is the intellectual property rights and the sharing of these amongst the participating entities. So it will need a very good management process to satisfy each party. I believe that Australia has potential to increase its manufacturing presence for launch vehicles, especially in the case of new space, where launch vehicles are often much smaller than previous designs. So new rockets being made to facilitate cheaper access to space for small satellites are often manufactured with advanced manufacturing techniques such as metal 3D printing, and this is a game changer.
Thank you so much, Professor Walter. Now we will continue to noon to interview our last experts from Australia. Hi, Dr. Rebecca. Thank you for being with us. So the third scenario seems to be the best for the shark. What do you think about it?
The idea to create a treaty between the Southern Hemisphere's nations is really quite interesting. The treaty could be flexible and grow over time because the interests of states can vary, and the purpose of their project is to facilitate access for all Southern Hemisphere nations.
In which manner the arrangements will facilitate access to space for those countries?
Well, one benefit could be priority access for their companies to launch within the launching site of the treaty.
Okay, thank you for your comment. And what about Australia? We have interviewed two other experts from China and Germany about the transportation facilities and the manufacturing capabilities of Australia. So, do you have any advice concerning Australia's infrastructure?
The Australian government currently has a ground station network infrastructure that covers deep space exploration, meteorology, astronomy, and Earth observation related activities, with contribution also from the private sector. Australia's advantages like low light pollution, low radio noise interference, and a well-developed ground network infrastructure are critical for providing real-time temporal resolution for any ground station. It would be beneficial to leverage these advantages for other countries if a hypothetical partnership was created.
Thank you, Dr. Rebecca. Now we are going back to the studio.
Okay, thank you for coming back to the last segment of the speech tank. So we'll now continue with ideas have international collaborative state-based framework. So give us your great asker. What do you want from us?
Well, to be honest, I'd like to hear your offers. But first, no deal will be done today unless you agree that the following recommendations are implemented if this scenario goes ahead.
Okay, interesting.
The first thing we need to ensure is that international engagements and treaty negotiations to set up such a framework must consider the liability of states and entities under the International Liability Treaty and the Outer Space Agreement. That is critical. Secondly, nations aspiring to be launch nations within the framework must ensure that proper facilities are built to facilitate it, with a particular focus on the new space era, as that will be the key driver. One such example is testing and evaluation services. They should be located on-site, particularly non-destructive testing, because that is important with the increase in reusable launch vehicles. That is a key driver for the high launch cadence that is required in the new space era. Thirdly, nations seeking to develop their access to space must ensure that a strong research and development focus is established within the country. And finally, in the context of the Southern Hemisphere, states with a similar launch potential as Australia should strongly be considered to be the launch states within the framework.
I think we have to ask for the opinion of the audience. Do you think it's really worth investing? Please indicate with your blue card if you support this idea. Yes.
Oh wow, it does look like a consensus. I love everything about this idea. However, I understand that I'm going to have to do a lot of work to get this off the ground. But I will give you 150 billion credits for a 50% stake, and I will personally work with you and my connections at Rocky Garden, SpaceX, and the Pacific Space Agency to make this a reality within 1 year.
We really want an investor that understands the massive return on investment that this proposal offers. Our financial analysis clearly identifies that new space industry is growing faster than the GDP of most first world nations. What else do we have on offer?
I've had a think about it, and I will offer something different. A 300 million credit loan with 10% interest that has to be repaid within 5 years.
That's so much debt. Come on, take my equity offer. You know you want to.
Well, will you implement our recommendations?
Absolutely.
I will.
Okay, give us 1 minute to think about it.
After more thinking, we believe that we would like Anu's mentorship and the connections along with the money. However, Guy, if you are open to it, we would like you to come on and partner with us as well. We think this would be the best for our project, so we accept it. Thank you.
I'm delighted to be a partner in this grand project.
Great, let's begin our adventure together.
Thank you, guys.
Congratulations.
It is an adventure for all of us. Thank you. Thank you.
Congratulations. Great. Looks like an international collaborative approach is a go. Let's have a round of applause for our judges so that we can clear the stage and welcome Christian back on the stage to begin the official Q&A segment.
All right, thank you to our judges, our Space Tank judges. Thank you to Anu, who led the Space Tank judges. And we finally have a deal in the room. I hope you enjoyed the the videos and the show just as much as we had fun creating it. We're now ready for your questions, and I have no doubt you have a lot of questions. There's a lot of content. You have the executive summary in front of you. Obviously, the report goes much deeper than that, but I imagine you have a few questions, and we're ready to take them now. Sorry, we have a roving mic there, so just raise your hand. Let Mina know if you want the mic, and it'll be on its way. Darren.
Hello, that was a great presentation and fantastic to see all the ideas coming together in such a short time. One of the things I've noticed when people talk about space and prestige, especially for old space, the last 60 years, it has been characterized by often diplomacy, military, economics, political, and that those terms have been used throughout various social structures around the world about how they frame their governments. But I noticed in your mission statement you added environmental, and I haven't seen that before in a policy type environment. So I'm just wondering if you could elaborate more on the environmental aspects, why you chose that as a key part of your mission statement.
Okay, thank you, Darren. So who'd like, Steve, you want to take that one? Thanks. Oh, another roving mic coming here. Thanks.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm Stephen, for everyone. Environmental considerations are emerging as one of the big threats to space access leading into the future. You have space debris in orbit, but you also have environmental effects on the ground. So we wanted to consider both of these in terms of the different scenarios that we were considering. So for example, on environmental effects on the ground, in scenario 1, where every nation is sort of pursuing in their own way, you'd have massive duplication of facilities in every nation that naturally has an effect on the environment. But more importantly, in the space environment with space debris and that sort of thing, it's a huge issue to be managed. And if you've got underutilized rockets that with, how do I say, their payload capacity is not full, you then get more space debris per effective satellite launched. So that's a consideration that should be taken in. As to how the policy is created to manage that, we didn't get time to explore that in depth, but it's definitely something that has to be considered as we work through this.
Thanks, Stephen. Anyone else? Questions? We have a lot of time for questions.
Well done to all the teams who created that. That's very entertaining. My question is around, we're seeing a lot of private entities enter into the new space race. Keen to understand what your thoughts are in their role versus that of governments. You highlighted in some of your other scenarios then governments more taking a lead. Keen to understand how you could, does a hybrid system come into it down the track, or a transitionary system?
Great, great question. Thanks, Lloyd. Looking at the crowd. So, yes, of course, we looked at the new space arena as a whole in the various segments of the market, whether launch vehicles, launch sites, satellite manufacturing, development, communications, Earth observation, etc. There's an entirely different arena that is coming up, and governments need to somehow find their way of dealing with that. And some governments have created space agencies that are a bit ahead of the curve, others are a bit behind the curve, and we have assessed also these in the southern hemisphere. And effectively, we've come to the conclusion that what we call the international state-based framework would be a good idea to sort of aggregate not only the demand in the southern hemisphere, also collaborate in a more unified fashion with the northern hemisphere, but also have a framework that allows to homogenize some of the aspects of regulation, maybe also technology safeguard agreements or similar aspects where it just facilitates that between nations based on the back of new space or private enterprise space companies. Did that answer the question a little bit? Yeah. All right. Follow-up question, Lloyd?
More around, well, comes down to how risk plays into this. So business risk to set up a new venture, be it a PPP or the likes. You know, someone or a company or the government has to take on the risk, and that then and the risk in this one is both financial and time. So who should be taking that on, or how that should be managed? Yeah.
So that gets into the nitty-gritty details, and due to various constraints, we haven't had time to dive in depth into these details, but the report addresses some of them, and there could be some way of anchor tenancy or anchor customership for space agencies, maybe even aggregating demand from other countries that could facilitate some of that, either for launch vehicle developers or for launch sites. But that is something that needs to be worked out either on a national level or within that framework that we're proposing. Which, by the way, doesn't necessarily have to start on a state level, as in a federal level. It could also be a lower or province-based level agreement. We're referring to the recent Luxembourg New South Wales agreement. And that could be set up in a more multilateral way. Yes?
With a lot of your launch sites, they're in regional, rural areas in Australia, and the distance is quite far. Who were you mainly looking for investment, government or private, in terms of developing the facilities around there and explaining to the world the distance travelled in Australia, which is often an issue?
Stephen? Oh, actually, Zvonko. Zvonko takes that. Thank you. Great question. Yep.
Hello, it's Zvonko. Basically, government's always going to play a role in one capacity or another. So there's going to be an initial setup, and we're going to have to Sorry, am I on? So we're going to have government with legislation, with smoothing the path for innovators and entrepreneurs to want to invest. And then there's going to be this relationship which continues, and over time, like we've seen with other tech industries, government will be able to relax its involvement to some degree, and the innovators and the entrepreneurs and businesses, they can see that there's a path, and once an infrastructure is actually established initially by government, that'll entice other organisations to get involved. Is that roughly what you wanted?
Yeah, I was just wondering how if you had any approaches to get the government to put quite a significant investment in place.
Yeah, not as yet. This is something down the pipeline.
That said, if it comes to infrastructure, there's, two parts of the infrastructure. One is, especially what you're referring to as regional areas, roads, actually entire towns, access to them via airports, seaports, etc. And that is something that would probably sit more on the government side, whereas the actual launch infrastructure, launch facility, whether that's warehouses, integration facilities, potentially even non-destructive testing for reusable rocket parts, etc. That would sit more on the entrepreneur side. Again, maybe bolstered by anchor tenancy or anchor customership by governments aggregated throughout the Southern Hemisphere. And that could be multiple sites. Rebecca.
Hi, my name's Rebecca Holiday. I just wanted to add to that. So you're talking about regional areas and government investment. So I think because people want launch sites to be in regional areas away from major cities, there's really a whole host of other government policies that could support that, such as population strategies, investment in regional areas. So I think that it's a multi-layered approach that requires all levels of government, federal, state and local, to work together. and for state and federal governments to understand the needs of their local communities and what local communities are looking for in terms of investment, and if that's something that they want within their regional town, their regional area. Does it protect the environment? Does it look after local business owners? How can they complement? So it really is a whole of government approach that's required in order to get investment into regional areas to support ongoing launch facilities and sites within those towns.
Thank you, Rebecca.
First, I just want to say thanks very much. I really enjoyed the creativity and the amount of time that you spent making this very entertaining. You definitely put the A in STEAM, right? So thanks very much. Thanks very much for that. My question would just be, obviously there's been an explosion in terms of the number of providers around the globe and the amount of financing flowing into these providers that are developing launch capability. So there really is quite a bit of competition out there. The three proposals presented here definitely inhabited a particular space on a spectrum from completely nationally independent to multinational. And I just wanted to hear your thoughts on the consideration that you might have had there in terms of time to market for any of these things, reaching the capability to actually begin launching under each framework. What was your consideration across that spectrum?
So when you say time to market, is for the way we assess this, or for a satellite that is being built,
well, so
or another payload?
If the goal is to develop the ability to launch something, broadly speaking, you can take a broad generality would be that a nation acting independently might be faster than a nation that's trying to put together a multinational implementation regime. That can take that could take longer. Did you give any consideration to that? If there's competition around the globe and it's reached record levels, did you have any, were you factoring in how this might affect those private companies that might fall under, say, the last proposal, and how this could delay the implementation of, working out those kinds of regimes could take longer? What did you think about that?
Stephen is going to take that one. Thanks, Emma.
Yes, we did think about it a little bit. In terms of the three different scenarios, I agree that taking it on an individual national level could be faster, but it also requires you to develop pretty much everything. And that could be quite slow, depending on how much money the government is able to throw into it and support new space companies. In contrast, the treaty could take a long time to negotiate, but then the advantage of that is you can leverage existing sites in member nations, and therefore that part would be a lot faster. And it depends on how many members would sign up to the treaty. The fewer, like if you can establish a core of 5 or 6 nations to begin with, it might be a lot faster. So it's a hard question to answer in that respect. It really depends on the specific countries that are involved in each scenario.
Yeah, and I agree. There's no correct answer there. It's just an interesting trade space when you think about all the different factors that might come into play with a more complex arrangement. So
absolutely.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. That was really excellent presentation. So my question might not fall directly within the scope of the report that you produced, but I'm hoping that you might be able to talk to it a little bit. So we've taken as granted almost that, we are interested in launching from the Southern Hemisphere. And certainly Australia, we haven't launched anything for a long time. So we're on this journey now to kind of developing this industry. So my question is more around, so if we take the countries that you've taken as the Southern Hemisphere, did you put any thought into the sort of the more social, ethical, community engagement type concerns? So we're all kind of playing on the same page. Yes, we want to launch, but how are we going to get the community behind this kind of activity, and how will that play into these international arrangements that you're considering?
Great question. Thank you. Rebecca.
Excellent question, and something I'm very passionate about. So I think what it comes down to, if we look at Australia as a case study, we would be looking to the Australian Space Agency has a plan for national engagement, for getting kids excited about, learning sciences, technology, maths, all of those aspects that are also which the industry relies on quite heavily. For obvious reasons, they're building rockets and satellites and things, so we would hope that these would be a good focus. So I think it takes time. It's a big country. There's a lot of people with a lot of different opinions. So that engagement framework is going to be crucial in terms of going around around the country to discover what people want, what they may not want, as we've seen with the with the Kimber nuclear decision recently. That divided opinion for many years. So I think it's going to be getting people excited. I think excitement will come when we see a rocket being launched from an Australian rocket being launched from Australian soil with an Australian payload. That would be an amazing experience. I think the inspiration will come there. But the build up to that and all the building blocks that need to happen before then will take time. And we would certainly look to the Australian Space Agency and their relationships with other countries and what's worked in the past in terms of engaging communities. So, yeah, excellent question. Thank you.
Thank you.
In terms of other community involvement, the issue of indigenous and land ownership obviously is something that's come up, and we understand there are various ways of involving those community groups, up into including them involving into the operation of a launch site. And we understand that Equatorial Launch Australia has made great strides in that, and is probably sort of like the best benchmark there in Australia at that point.
So I have a question. It's interesting to see the makeup of the class, and the majority of you come from the Northern Hemisphere. So how did that create any tensions about your own countries versus the sort of Southern Hemisphere approach? Was that something that was discussed as an opportunity or a threat to your existing legacies?
Great question. Yeah, I don't think it was so much Northern Hemisphere and Southern Hemisphere, but yeah, interesting. Zvonko, do you want to talk on that? Maybe Shideng, do you want to?
So we did spend a fair bit of time talking about our little group and how we got together and the interdisciplinary, international and intercultural sort of differences we had. One of the benefits of being compressed in such a short time frame is we get to know each other a lot quicker than we would normally. So in those terms, and in regards to the question, we didn't actually discuss specifically, address, let's say, some of the issues you might be asking about, the differences north to south. We were more about the cultures, what do you guys think about this? So we didn't raise it to a political level, if you like. But in terms of how the group worked together, we found that we had, in the end, no differences, whereas when we started, there appeared to be some. Is that a fair answer?
Judges, my name is Shiden Yang from China. There are 9 Chinese members in this sub-team, so pretty big team. As you know, China has its own space industry, pretty strong, pretty robust, pretty vigorous. But we are very open to international cooperation. We are totally, we like competition because competition makes us both grow, make us stronger.
Thank you, Shideng.
With your inevitable
need to have governments involved, did you discuss anything with regard to infiltration of military government requirements within your space launch in the Southern Hemisphere?
Interesting question. Yes, we did talk about that a lot, whether it's the more traditional view on dual use and the more, let's say, commercial availability of components that are being used within military. So basically like creeping in of COTS components into the military, and therefore creating an environment there where you have governments and military using more commercial companies or even products. So that's definitely something that we've been thinking about, and we deliberately made the framework that we're proposing about commercial and civil use, obviously recognizing the fact that a lot of military use, especially in low Earth orbit EO constellations, can be used for other uses, such as military and intelligence. I don't think that's a big secret, and there's really not much that we wanted to draw a big delineation in our model. That said, if it comes to geostationary orbit, military intelligence, that's not something that this framework would be useful for, also because of other sovereign issues that would play into it. So this is really more about the commercial side of things. Steve?
Yeah, I'll just add to that. Christian covered most of it. There are things that will have to be considered, such as ITAR, especially in the commercial space. I don't think ITAR specifically will be much of an issue. Already a lot of companies have to take that into account, and they just have sectioned off work areas where things that are ITAR restricted can be worked on by certain people. In terms of the strategic dual use, such as launch facilities being used for missile launches or that sort of thing, as Christian said, we didn't really cover that because we imagine this to be much more of a commercial venture backed by governments. There will have to be some provision, though, in any sort of treaty or framework to really establish how that works, especially because if in the framework only a subset of nations are designated as launch states, if another nation wants to use launch for something that is not strictly commercial, there might be some issues there. So we haven't had time to really hash that out in detail, but it is a very important consideration. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions?
We will close out this session. As you know, we will have an act, but I just want to mention for the online listeners, we will be back for the second presentations at 10:50 Adelaide time.
10:50 Adelaide time. Oh wait, I have an incoming communication. There's something happening right now. I'm not sure, but there's some static. Oh wait.
Oh.
My God, I don't know what that is.
Just received the news.
אלפי חלליות משוגרות מרחבי העולם.
Saat ini kita sedang merasakan bencana global yang tidak diketahui.
ขณะนี้เรากำลังดำเนินการอพยพมนุษย์โลกไป
My
ยัง
God.
ดาวไททัน
Oh my God, we're moving to the moon. Seems like we need some lunar farming.
Evacuiraj te zemlju.
Evacuare il pianeta.
We state emergency here.
撤离地球，撤离地球，撤离。
Thank you. Just doing credits.
job. This is just an effort of less than 10 days, I should once again emphasize. So once again, a round of applause from us. Right, and we will convene with the next presentation in 30 minutes. See you later.
Mic's back. Hello, hello. Hello. If anyone is having the mics, please hand out over to the mic desk. Yeah, yeah.
How many mics are there? Do you want me to help you? Yeah, there's a mic. He has to come back. Mics? One, two, my mic one. Mic.
Test, test. Is it working? Is it working? Hello, hello? Hello? What?
Is this chair, Myra?
Food, cupcake.
Where is the Our Yeah, yes. Sorry, we were joking.
When he was checking things out,
Maybe we should move
looking at
because
his
we are on
notes
the.
on his.
They are going to.
That's a good point. Should we sit down there, maybe?
None there.
I've been asked to hold till the judges get here. My guess is they're going to be pretty late. Since it's the first time they've done it. And they don't even know. They got to go over that. So we might be 5 or 10 minutes.
I put them on to read. Oh. It's a lot easier for me to read them. But like, I have to. I never know which one I'm long-sighted, I'm short-sighted. Can go. And the one that means I need to wear glasses. I mean, I can read without them on, but for reading through standard theory, it's easier.
Really cool. That's just what I was told.
Is it good, that one?
I guess it's so that no one's spraying with them.
No one changes that one. No touch.
I dogged that one out.
I can't really tell when I'm on microphone or not. Just talk, speak loudly in my normal talk like the whole time. I'll like tell you up or down. I'll try and follow it.
You have to be very close to read.
The United Lunar General Assembly. It'll be up on the screen. Absolutely. But I think, I was saying, I think that
Yes.
here at 27 got excellent. That's meme that Melanie posted yesterday. When did you become an expert in lunar farming? Last week.
For you. All right, welcome back everyone. I hope you enjoyed the first presentation. And now it's time to go to the moon, as you watched at the end. So it is now my pleasure to introduce to the stage the team project chair of the second presentation, Mr. Gary Martin. He is the Vice President also of International Space University, responsible for the Northern operations. Gary?
Thank you very much. As you got to, I want to welcome our guests and our assessors. I'm very happy for you to be here and to listen to our team project. You saw that you're going to need someday a way to close the food loop. So this is something that hasn't been done yet, and it's a very tough technical problem, and it has other problems too with economical and policy issues that come up when you're using the resources on the moon. But if humanity is going to leave the Earth in a sustainable way and move out and develop our inner solar system, we're going to have to figure out how to do this. We're not going to be able to bring the food for the people doing the things in space from Earth. We'll never be able to afford it, and then it's a very weak supply chain because you know how difficult it is. So this wonderful group of 27 people, very interdisciplinary, from 8 different countries, took on this hard project. And so they put their data into a really interesting story. I hope you enjoy the way that they present what they found out. So I'm not going to delay it any longer. Thank you very much.
I am the last human. I hope this message is preserved for our galactic neighbours, to tell them who we are, to show them how we lived, to teach them why we are gone. For 200,000 years and more, we roamed the Earth. We discovered fire, crafted tools, worshipped gods, established cultures, built monuments and waged war. We applied scientific principles to unlock the secrets of who we are and our place in the cosmos. How could all our efforts have coalesced into this calamity? We are visionaries. We are explorers. We are conquerors. We are human, but we are not interplanetary. We had a plan. We had a plan. This plan outlined the first step to leave Earth's cradle, where civilization could spring forth again. But we are fragile. Think to yourself for a moment, what would you do if your planet was dying? When your attempts to advance society backfired? When natural disaster and pestilence eradicated the food supply? When everything goes wrong? We could have resolved the Moon Agreement. We could have expanded the space law framework. We could have chosen a site near Shackleton Crater, where all the water is, and we could have had our engineers build the infrastructure. We could have managed the environmental risks of the moon and protected our humans. We could have had civilization spring forth once again, but we didn't. I have a distant memory of hope, determination, and vigour. It was the year 2020. We were the graduates of International Space University, a university which dreamed of a spacefaring civilization, a university whose founders, whose credo was, "We will aspire to the stars with wisdom, vision, and effort." Together. Why didn't we get there? This plan was the key to our survival. It was everything. It was what could have been.
Come with me back to the present for a moment. We need to consider the prospect of lunar farming to develop a sustainable farming system to benefit how we care for our Earth, as well as for human settlement on other celestial bodies.
Well put, Arthur. One of the things we need to consider is the legal and policy implications of the establishment of a lunar farming settlement. How would we put that type of framework together? What would it entail?
Yes, good question. Lunar farming poses a vast array of legal and policy ramifications.
Of course, there's a lot to consider. For example, the Outer Space Treaty of 1967 specifically limits the use of the moon and all other celestial bodies to peaceful purposes only. It also prohibits nation-states from claiming sovereignty over outer space or any celestial body. Are there any other treaties that we need to be aware of?
Actually, there is another really important one for the moon. It's called the Moon Agreement, but has not been widely received with the international community.
I see. I think in order to remain compliant with these treaties, we have to ensure that any lunar farming practice, and the science and technology that is derived benefits all of mankind. We will have to create an international governing body to tackle these issues.
Yes, we could call it the United Lunar General Assembly, the ULGA for short. One day, the ULGA might even make the world news headlines. From San Francisco to Beijing.
Good afternoon, and it's a very special afternoon here in San Francisco as the world gathers to watch footage beamed down to us live from the United Lunar General Assembly on August 1. First, we will go to our lunar farming correspondent who is at the meeting and who will let us know how the lack of nitrogen conditions that were discovered during the Apollo missions in the last century were overcome by the lunar farm so they could successfully grow plants using lunar soil.
Muy buenas tardes. El día de hoy me encuentro reportando desde la Ciudad de México mientras espera la transmisión en vivo de los delegados de Argus 1 como parte de su reporte anual del progreso de la Asamblea General de la Luna Unida. Se traerán a los expertos para discutir sobre los retos que se han enfrentado en la Luna, así como una entrevista exclusiva con uno de los diseñadores de los sistemas de agricultura utilizados. Como se sabe, muchas de estas tecnologías no solamente han sido fundamentales para la vida en la Luna, por ejemplo la inclusión de chapulines mexicanos en la alimentación, sino que también han aportado grandes avances tecnológicos en la Tierra.
Bună dimineața! Vă doresc bun venit în cadrul acestei emisiuni speciale a știrilor de dimineață din București pentru participarea la ședința specială a Adunării Generale a Națiunilor Unite pentru explorarea Lunii. Cu toții știm că țara noastră susține inovația în domeniul spațial prin intermediul Agenției Spațiale Române și a altor organizații de cercetare-dezvoltare. Acum putem afla direct de la cei mai importanți fermieri despre exploatările lor din primul an, parte din proiectul Argus 1, având România ca membru fondator.
السلام عليكم. الإمارات أطلقت مسبار الأمل في منتصف 2020 الذي وصل إلى مدار الكوكب الأحمر خلال الربع الأول من 2021. قدم مسبار الأمل أول دراسة شاملة عن مناخ كوكب المريخ وطبقات غلافه الجوي المختلفة الذي وصل إلى الكوكب الأحمر عام 2021. في المهمة استمرت لمدة سنة مريخية واحدة التي ساعدت على الإجابة على الأسئلة العلمية الرئيسية حول الغلاف الجوي للقمر وأسباب فقدان غاز الهيدروجين والأكسجين من غلاف الجوي.
नमस्ते इंडिया। इस समाचार कार्यक्रम में आपका स्वागत है। जैसे कि यूनाइटेड लूनार जनरल असेंबली का या संयुक्त चंद्र सामान्य सभा अपनी लंबे समय से प्रतीक्षित बैठक आयोजित कर रही है, दुनिया ने अपनी सांस रोक रही है। हम नई दिल्ली से पहले वर्ष में अपनी प्रगति पे पहली बार चंद्र खेद रिपोर्ट में शामिल होने के लिए यहाँ आ गया है। भारत के चंद्रयान कार्यक्रम का वैज्ञानिक तकनीकों का उपयोग चंद्र जल का चयन करने के लिए किया गया है। आर्गस 1 का ऊर्जा उत्पादन और कृषि के लिए चंद्र जल का आवश्यकता है। ये उद्यम मानवता के लिए दूसरी दुनिया बसाने के लिए पहला कदम है।
வணக்கம். நான் நமது சந்திரயான் திட்டங்கள் மூலமாக பல வருடங்களாக நிலவில் ஆராய்ச்சியில் ஈடுபட்டு வருகின்றோம். இதன் மூலம் நிலவை ஆராய்வதில் உலக சமூகத்திற்கு நாம் குறிப்பிடத்தக்க பங்களிப்பை செய்து வருகிறோம். இதன் தொடர்ச்சியாக நாம் அவளுடன் எதிர்பார்த்து கொண்டிருக்கும் நிலவு பண்ணை தொடர்பான முதலாவது ஐக்கிய நிலவு மாநாடு அங்குள்ள ஆர்குஸ் என்ற பகுதியில் நடைபெற்று வருகிறது. அதை பற்றிய விவரங்களுக்காக அங்குள்ள நமது நிருபருடன் இணைவோம்.
大家早上好，现在我在北京为您报道。月球农场 Argus 1号项目到今天已经运行整整1周年了。在这特殊的日子里，我们即将迎来首届月球联合大会的召开。自2019年中国嫦娥4号搭载的棉花种子在月球上首次成功发芽以来，大家一直高度关注月球农场的进展。1年的时间转瞬即逝，我们共同经历了许多激动人心的时刻。我们在直播中见证了种植第一株水稻，培育第一批蘑菇，现在它们已经硕果累累。
We're broadcasting to you from Sydney as Australians around the world await the opening address of the United Lunar General Assembly Review Meeting. Australia is known for its science and innovative technologies, with the CSIRO and other Australian organisations having contributed to the development of many Argus 1 subsystems. We'll be tuning in to hear about some of the exciting applications that are emerging from the lunar farming operations.
It was the project they said we couldn't complete, the questions they thought we'd never answer. But today, you can be part of the journey. Discover the new innovations in space law, agriculture, and engineering that our brave lunar farmers are employing to counter the extreme lunar environment. Don't miss this special live broadcast direct from your lunar farm. Argus 1. Sustainable farming for the future, today.
As Chair of the United Lunar General Assembly, I hereby formally open this meeting, the 24th meeting of our organisation, celebrating the successes of the Argus 1 initiative. Our mission statement during planning envisions sustainable lunar agriculture that can support the nutritional requirements of humans and allow them to thrive. For those of us on the panel who have been here since the early planning phases, I can say that this is truly an exciting time. Before we begin hearing from the experts who have made this success, it is important that we reflect on the history of the project. With a delegate from the United States, please provide some context.
Yes, thank you. Lunar farming is imperative to further human exploration on the moon and to extend our reach into space. World leaders saw the creation of a sustainable lunar farm as a critical step toward becoming an interplanetary species. Through the United Agreement of States, our authority was established, the United Lunar Authority. Our role is to provide international governance over lunar activities. This General Assembly, including today's virtual representatives, are the current leadership of the United Lunar Authority. Commitment to scientific inquiry and knowledge sharing across the nations who joined the United Lunar Authority has been vital. The Outer Space Treaty of 1967, along with the Moon Agreement, prevented the establishment of a purely commercial or purely governmental lunar farm until legal experts settled questions around sovereignty through the creation of the United Lunar Authority. It was at that point that the farm could proceed.
Thank you, Delegate. Would the delegate from Australia please give us a brief overview of some of the economic realities of the lunar farm?
I would be happy to. As many of you know, launch costs fell over the period leading up to our launching of farm construction materials, making it easier to attract government support for the project. Due to the scientific nature of this venture, private investors were worried about the risk-to-return ratio. Public-private partnerships and consortiums were established as governments and larger foundations were interested to invest because of opportunities for economic spillover benefits and applications that could deliver productivity benefits to Earth-based supply chains. As our lunar community has grown, more deep space missions have commenced, and we are now in the process of managed complexities of scaling up production to attempt a small but stable supply of food surplus from a closed system. Though the farm was not forecast to be profitable or self-sustaining financially, our lunar farming work has led to numerous spin-offs in areas like water management, harsh environment food production, and genetic food modifications for resilience. Using licensed intellectual property, processes, and technologies developed for the lunar farm, these spin-off applications are now being used on Earth and for other space missions.
Thank you, Delegate. Finally, could I please ask the delegate from China to walk us through today's proceedings and call our first expert?
Yes, today we will hear from several experts who had
turned the possibility of lunar farm into ARX-1, a successful and sustainable operations. We will hear first from the commander of the lunar base and the chief engineer of the lunar farm regarding infrastructure and site selections. We will then hear from several members of the lunar medical team, followed by an overview of who will provide context around the lunar farm's importance from a human health and well-being point of view. Finally, we will hear more about the agricultural aspects of the farm from our leader for agricultural science divisions. Let's go ahead and connect with the commander first of the Lunar Command Center.
Thank you. I'm here at Argus-1 Base Command with Chief Engineer Wei-Jian Sun. We're standing in front of our 3D moon map to report on progress on the lunar farm. We selected a South Pole location next to the Shackleton crater. There are three main advantages of this location. Firstly, water ice is abundant in several nearby craters, frozen in place due to the permanent shadow inside. Water is needed for the farming activities and can also provide oxygen and hydrogen for fuel. Secondly, solar power. Some of the crater rims and nearby ridges are peaks of almost eternal light. They experience almost continuous sunlight exposure for solar energy production, compared to equatorial regions that have continuous darkness for up to 14 Earth days as the moon slowly rotates. And thirdly, the temperature variations are less extreme at the poles, helping our engineering efforts to maintain a healthy climate for farming activities. Here I will hand over to our Chief Engineer Wei-Jian Sun to explain some of the engineering progress on the lunar farm.
Thank you. Solar energy has been used to extract liquid water from the ice and to electrolyze the water into oxygen and hydrogen for regenerative fuel cells with a specific energy of 400 to 1000 watt-hours per kilogram. We are having solar thermal heating plants to extract carbon dioxide critical to plant growth from the lunar soil. Attempts to harvest nitrogen with similar approach has so far failed, largely due to the very low levels of nitrogen in the river ghost. Nitrogen has been supplied from the Earth, and the recycling system are close to closing the loop on these resources. Exposure to solar and galactic radiation is a major issue on the lunar surface, as the atmosphere and the magnetic field are too weak to provide the protection we enjoy on Earth. We are testing both a glass house with water barriers and underground design with optical fibers directing sunlight onto plants. We are building connectivities between the farm and human habitats to recycling oxygen and carbon dioxide, moving towards closing the loop on these resources. We are also moving close to the loop on water and macro and micronutrients by water and solid waste treatment and recycling.
Thank you. And if you followed our journey so far, you're aware of the success of the farming activities. We're still searching for underground lava tubes near the poles to use for further expansion of the farms and settlements. So far, these tubes have only been found closer to the equatorial regions. But we have successfully established a lunar farm and expansion activities are underway. Back to you at the United Lunar Assembly.
Thank you, Commander Frost. Thank you, Chief Engineer Wei-Jian Sun. I would like to add that throughout the design and construction of Argus-1, heavy emphasis has been placed on supporting the long-term sustainability of outer space activities by linking to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. This is evidenced by a regenerative recycling system paired with in-situ resource utilization of water, extraction of carbon dioxide from lunar regolith, and the use of the heavy metal content in lunar basalt rock. I would now like to invite the delegates to share their thoughts on any aspects of engineering and infrastructure that the Commander and Chief Engineer did not cover. Does the delegate from Australia wish to address the Assembly?
Yes, thank you, Chair Alexandru. The moon is an extreme risk environment. Overcoming such challenges has only been made possible by adopting an interdisciplinary approach. By constructing Argus 1 at the South Pole, we have minimised the amount of time that our site is in darkness to approximately 20% of the month, or 5.6 terrestrial days. During the remainder of the time, we are able to generate 27 kilowatts of power almost continuously through the construction of a 100 square metre solar array operating at 20% solar cell efficiency per year of light. As Chief Engineer Wei Shan mentioned, the excess energy generated by our solar array is stored in a renewable hydrogen fuel cell system to provide power for our farm throughout the 5.6 days that it is in darkness. Furthermore, we have been able to use the native vacuum of the lunar surface to produce solar cells from silicon, aluminium, and glass with ingredients extracted from the lunar regolith. With surface temperatures ranging from 102 to 387 degrees Kelvin, power management and efficiency have impacts on regulating temperatures and minimizing exposure to extreme thermal environments. Can the delegate from the United States please comment on how our engineering relates to the economic viability of Argus 1?
Certainly, and thank you, Delegate. You make some interesting points that directly relate to the economic viability of our farm. Engineering to incorporate in situ resource utilization not only reduced the cost of establishing Argus 1 by reducing our mass at launch, but also continues to support our vision for a sustainable lunar farm by reducing our reliance on resupply from Earth. Of course, these efficiency measures also ensure that we are able to provide the required habitat, nutritional, and medical conditions for our farmers. Chair Alexandru, perhaps now is an appropriate time to hear about how we've been maintaining the health of our people.
Thank you, delegates. The health and well-being of our people is primary to our social sustainability framework. I would like to now invite Dr. Johannesson and Dr. Nicolaescu to present their findings and discuss the health and well-being of our farmers.
Thank you, Chair Alexandru. I'm Dr. Johansson, and this is my colleague, Dr. Nicolaescu. The mission design of Argus 1 incorporated the nutritional, physiological, and psychological needs of our farmers. And so far, I feel that our program has been very successful in meeting the base metabolic rate energy and macronutrient requirements of our farmers. I prepared a table for your review, which outlines these requirements.
Excuse me. Our farmers live underground, away from the ionizing radiations, so they will have a low vitamin D levels. This can lead to loss of bone density and poor mental health, can't it?
You are correct. Many of these health factors are bidirectional. The best sources of vitamin D are in meat and dairy products, and these are not produced on the moon. Instead, we are using vitamin D supplements to account for that. One of our farmers reported a lengthy and constant low mood, while also showing a loss of muscle strength and bone density. I personally suspect that we need to reevaluate our nutritional requirements to determine how they may be different from ones for those on Earth.
If I may, while that case is known to me, there's no direct evidence that this was a result of inadequate nutrition. In fact, we are constantly improving and adapting our program, and so far this appears to be an isolated case. Our nutrition numbers were calculated for an average adult based on data from the World Health Organization's energy expenditure equations. So there's really no reason to assume that they are wrong.
Right, Dr. Johansson. And meeting these requirements goal is crucial. We know vitamins A, C, and E are effective countermeasures to cell damage and from radiation and microgravity. Hence, we need to consider the possibility that someone will need to return to Earth for medical reasons such as radiation sickness, for example. We just can't rule that out.
Forgive me for interrupting, doctors. I'm not a doctor or anything, but I wanted to know if there are any long-term effects to the body due to radiation.
Thank you for your question. Our people are exposed to some low levels of ionizing radiation from solar particle events, galactic cosmic rays, and secondary radiation. In the space environment, long-term exposure to radiation can cause oxidative stress, but most of the radiation is attenuated by our underground structures and regolith barriers. Since the establishment of Argus 1, we have registered an equivalent dose of about 1.12 grays of radiation. To put that in context, a 10 gray dose of X-rays depletes the white blood cells in humans. Interestingly, the same dose does not seem to be as detrimental for plant life. And in fact, ionizing radiation is shown to kill bacteria and even preserve the food.
Chair Alexandru, while the radiation levels presented here by Dr. Johansson are correct, I fear we may be putting our people at risk. So I recommend bringing some our people home and then conducting a risk analysis of the lunar environment so we can better understand the situation.
Thank you, doctors. It is clear you do not agree on these issues. Dr. Nicolaescu, please tell us, do you have anything else to add to support your suggestion of bringing lunar farmers home?
Yes, Chair Alexandru. It is clear, I have a personal account that, and that I would like to play for you, just to show you the effects and opinion of our patient in question.
Please proceed.
Yeah.
大家好，我是海宇。我们9个成员在月球农场已经工作6个月了，一切都进展顺利，我们都在努力的工作，这是一个非常出色的团队。个人来讲，虽然有巡视器的帮助，但是呢，农场每天都需要大量的维护工作，如果人员太累的话，可能他就干不好工作，而且还会给团队带来紧张、烦躁的气氛。我们在这儿，我们的一些美国队员对这个昆虫还有一些抵触，所以他们跳过了几次肉餐，我很担心他们的体重。很难得有一个安静的时间，我非常想念我的家人，我的太太和我的儿子。我更想念透过蓝天白云洒下的那些阳光。我在月球表面做了很多工作，主要是对太阳能翻板进行维护。可能是过多吸入了纯氧，让我还感到一些不适。但是不用担心，我们这里已经大家都摄了足够的蔬菜，而且一直在服用维生素 D 和 B12。每到2周，我们都会使用超声波扫描仪进行检查我们的眼睛，并且进一些纠正性的治疗。我们想确保我们的视力，尤其是我，要保证我的视力良好，否则你们会要给我运更多的眼镜了。还有，在我离开之前，John 向我表达了问候。这个家伙。由于吃的东西不多，营养不良，上个月小腿骨折了，他可能还需要一段时间在我们的医务室里边进行康复。好了，就是这些吧。我是934号宇航员孙海宇。
The Assembly thanks Haiyu for sharing his experience. It is clear the Assembly should consider the concerns of Dr. Nicolaescu with care. Dr. Johansson, can you please provide details about how we currently meet the nutritional goals of our people?
Absolutely. We selected foods based on their nutritional value, their history of growth in space, and their potential for use as non-terrestrial food sources. With these foods, we can create diverse meals to meet the physiological and psychological requirements of our farmers. In this meal planning table, we've included cell cultures and insects for their high nutritional value.
Thank you, Dr. Johansson. Does the Assembly have any further questions?
I do.
Delegate Haji, please proceed.
Dr. Johansson, don't you think that crickets will be rejected by many members of our crew? After all, they are insects.
That's a fantastic question, Delegate Haji. Insects do provide a good source of protein. And acceptance of an insect-heavy diet is highly subjective. If there is no cultural connection or personal precedent, people may have psychological barriers against eating insects. Humans have a strong psychological connection with how their food looks, tastes, and smells.
Do you agree, Dr. Nicolescu?
Yes, I do. However, we can prepare foods differently to make them more attractive. Processing insects into other well-known foods is a common method. Some of the other methods we use are roasting, dehydrating, and milling insects to be as a flour-like supplement in other foods. The more appealing a food is, the more we can ensure that our farmers will be happy and well-nourished.
Indeed. In addition to meals, our sustainable lunar farm provides a large economic benefit, as it eliminates the reliance on bringing foods from Earth. Did you know that transporting enough food to the moon for 10 people would cost approximately $14.6 billion per year? That's $1 million per kilogram, and that doesn't even include water.
About the water, are we mining it in situ as well as recycling it?
Yes, we are doing both.
And how are we managing biosecurity risks and pathogens?
For that, we use a system-based approach to evaluate exposure pathways, and we are able to quarantine if necessary.
Yes, we've separated our soil-based activities across 3 locations to prevent an outbreak from spreading. We will also use a seaweed mixture in the soil to further reduce pathogen risks, as recommended by the Agricultural Sciences Division. Does the Assembly have any further questions?
Delegates? Thank you, doctors. We have no further questions for you. May the Assembly please now consider the concerns raised by Dr. Nicolescu. We should conduct a detailed review of the required nutritional targets of a lunar farm and perform a relevant risk analysis on possible detrimental health outcomes. Is there any dissent from the delegates? Are there any comments from the delegates?
I agree with the position of Chuck. August 1 is moving into a new stage of growth and expansion. We should address any health comments as soon as possible, but we also need to consider the ongoing economic viability of the farming operations.
Well said, Delegate Xiangshu. The Assembly has thus reached a consensus and shall assign a lead investigator to the matter when we next convene. To address economic considerations, we will hear from our Chief Economist, Kate Sweetman, on the operations of the farm.
Thank you for the opportunity to address the Assembly. The current nature of human activities on the moon are primarily scientific rather than commercial. And while the core function of the farm is to provide a more affordable, reliable supply of nutrition to keep these other activities running, the current agricultural operations are already producing valuable scientific knowledge and commercializable intellectual property. And this was always the outcome anticipated and was in fact a key driver of the consortium that provided initial investments to this mission.
Being that we've operated now for 1 year, can you please detail some of our key outputs from the farm?
Certainly, Delegate Haji. If I may, I'd like to invite Mr. Oscar Rosas, head of the Luxembourg Translational Technologies Institute and chair of the consortium established under the regulation of this Assembly, to now share insights on the performance of Argus 1.
Thank you, Kate. The moon has provided a unique environment that has delivered so much new agricultural and biological knowledge that otherwise we could not have gained with any amount of Earth-based investment or experimentation. Outputs from this can be highlighted in 3 examples. First, we are entering international industrial research collaborations with universities based on the 9 open access journal articles we have published so far. Second, we are negotiating license agreements on our patents for the lightning and regenerative life support technologies. And third, by implementing new processes from our lunar operations, we are improving productivity of commercial activities on Earth. With these outcomes, the consortium can see a clear pathway to returns for activities on Earth and in future space ventures, and is pleased to continue with current agricultural activities.
Understanding these current directions is important. How does the consortium expect lunar food products to provide returns for activity on Earth and the future space ventures?
Yeah, fair question, Delegate Sir. While we have been pleased with the food yields produced so far, we are operating in a closed system with limited resources. This poses challenges for increasing the scales of production that would normally help lower prices to commercially competitive levels. The transport costs and sustainability challenges associated with exporting lunar produce also poses barriers to any commercial ventures based on off-moon supplies of physical goods.
Thank you, Oscar. To add to this, we acknowledge that lunar activities are now ready to expand, so we are working with the consortium to address challenges needed to scale up operations in a closed system. And as the lunar settlement continues to grow, we anticipate that the value and cost savings of growing fresh food on the moon rather than importing food from Earth will strengthen economic reasoning for continued investment and expansion of the farm to sustain all human moon-based activities.
We at the Assembly have complete confidence that it will, and thank you both for your time.
As Earthlings, we see it above us in the night sky every night and dream of living there. As Moonlings, we dream of Titan, Mars and distant stars. Our dreams are coming true. We bring you Argus 1, the project they said would never get off the ground. From humble beginnings of 10 lunar farmers, we are now expanding, and you can be part of the journey too. Applications for new lunar farmers are open now, so contact the ULGA today.
Following on from the consortium's insights about expanding farming operations, the Assembly will now receive a presentation from the lead of the Agricultural Sciences Division, Melanie Ward, and the Chief Agricultural Scientist, Garrett Turner.
Thank you for your invitation to speak today. Garrett and I have the privilege of covering our dedicated work building the farming operations on Argus 1. This is possible thanks to our amazing engineering team from China who designed this stunning facility. This design concept was developed alongside the research into what the farming would entail. Here is a small glimpse into our facilities at Argus 1. We can even customize the temperature to suit our crops, cell cultures, and insects. We monitor the atmosphere, cycle carbon and water for plant growth, and house many different farming methods. Part of the structure of Argus 1 was built with a 3D printer, using some of the lunar regolith as material. The design of our infrastructure was first and foremost to accommodate traditional farming methods. We then altered the systems and methods to suit a lunar environment. For example, instead of planting directly into the lunar surface, we process lunar regolith and bring it into the structure for agricultural purposes. This is just a small glimpse into our facility, but we felt it demonstrated the spectacular attention to detail.
Adding onto Melanie's comments, lunar soil is composed of elements similar to what is found in terrestrial soil, such as oxygen, carbon, and iron, and with one notable exception, the negligible level of nitrogen. Nitrogen is critical in promoting plant growth as a central and rate-limiting step in the production of chlorophyll. As such, we investigated ways of modifying lunar soil to increase its stability for plant growth. We've extracted nitrogen from human urine and fecal matter. We have prioritized nitrogen-fixing plants like legumes and soybeans in the crop rotation, which leave behind a strong level of nitrogen after they're grown in soil. This helps maintain healthy nitrogen levels for the next plant grown. Before we move on, does the Assembly have any questions?
Thank you. How are we planning to process the human waste?
Thank you for the question. It was important to us to have a closed loop system, so we grow fungi to break down organic waste. The fungi then doubles as a food source.
Now, not everything went according to plan at first, because ultimately we were embarking on a new field of agriculture. It took us a few times to get the balance right, but as you can see over time, we slowly improved and then discovered the optimal mixture, as well as adjustments to soil texture to have a successful harvest. One of the farmers from our base will bring around the successful subjects for the attention of the assembly.
We successfully grew plants in the lunar soil, including tomato, carrot, garden cress, sweet potato, soybean, and peanuts, as well as seaweed and rice in our hydroponics system. Hydroponics felt like the right farming method to bring to the moon, as NASA had proven its success in the Controlled Ecological Life Support System program. Seaweed has initially been grown for agricultural purposes, but we hope to later factor it into the diet of farmers to increase the variety of crops available for consumption. Traditional terrestrial farming methods include grinding it into the soil and factoring it into the mixture of the hydroponic system.
Thanks, Garrett. Are there any further questions from the assembly? Yes, sir?
How did you choose which plants to grow on Argus 1?
Excellent question. The plants we grow were selected based on results from past scientific studies and for their nutritional value. Scientific criteria for crop selections include the ability to grow under relatively low light intensities in limited space, while being high in calories with a good tolerance to stress from urine recycling.
Also, our infrastructure allows us to control climate conditions for crops and insects, so our scientists can explore innovative lunar agricultural solutions. Inventions in farming, such as utilizing LEDs as a source of light, can offer some ideas that can be transferred back for terrestrial farming practices to accommodate the changing climate on Earth.
Thank you for that response. Please provide the Assembly with a closing statement.
With pleasure, Chair Alexandru. Our first year on Argus 1 has seen many successful harvests, which has inspired some astounding advances in technology and agricultural sciences. Our team looks forward to continuing this journey and would like to acknowledge the support of the United Lunar General Assembly.
Thank you, Melanie. Thank you, Garrett. Your report on agricultural endeavours was very detailed. At the commencement of our meeting today, I reminded us all that we envisioned Argus 1 would enable humans to thrive using sustainable lunar agriculture methods. Much to the credit of our interdisciplinary approach, I believe that vision has been realized. I would like to invite each of the delegates to provide a final comment before I close this session. Delegate Xiangshu?
Yes, thank you, Chair Alexandru. I hope we have demonstrated here today the many successes of Argus 1. We have overcome scientific, economical, and legal challenges that are encountered with establishing of off-world patients, and I hope those of you join us from us and inspired to support us further.
Yes, indeed. Argus 1 has generated a broad range of societal, scientific, and economic benefits. We have overcome much of what we learn here is not simply scientific or mission design related, but must also be appreciated for the ability to satisfy the exploratory nature of the human spirit.
Certainly. In addition, we're at the point now where we're beginning to see returns to the original investors on Earth. Our scientific pursuits here pose the possibility of generating further IP and knowledge that will benefit all of humanity, not only those on Argus 1.
That's right. We have already produced scientific publications on our farming techniques and are continuously refining our ideas about how to establish settlements on other celestial bodies. We anticipate these learnings will be easily transferable to the settlement of Mars and beyond in the future.
Thank you, delegates. I thank you for your contributions to Argus 1 and this assembly. I would also like to personally thank the efforts of all our lunar farmers and experts, as well as those supporting us from Earth. Through your efforts, we are progressing forward via our roadmap to developing a lunar settlement, updated from the lessons we have learned here. Firstly, we minimize the direct cost and number of resupplies of establishing lunar infrastructure by utilizing in-situ resources. The structures we build are either subsurface or semi-subsurface and have a regolith barrier to attenuate solar radiation, which ensures the health and well-being of our farmers. To maximize our health outcomes, the foods we grow and consume shall offer nutritional and culinary diversity and be psychologically appealing. We must develop and improve systems to provide light, water, and temperature stability for use in a variety of agricultural techniques. We should diversify these techniques and have identified soil-based farming, hydroponics, insect growth, and cell cultures as the most suitable methods. The United Lunar General Assembly is structured using the CERN model. Comprised of international member states, we operate as the legal authority for all lunar activities and have adopted the United Nations guidelines for the long-term sustainability of outer space activities. Finally, the importance of remaining in compliance with the Outer Space Treaty and the Moon Agreement cannot be understated. To this end, our farming endeavors encompass the collection, analysis, and free-flow distribution of scientific data and technology transfer. In closing, Argus 1 is a collaborative project that unites member states in a shared vision. As such, the United Lunar General Assembly was established as an international authority charged with managing the operations of our activities on the Moon. Core to our values is ensuring equality for member states and encouraging private investment into our farm. Humanity should be proud of our accomplishments. We have turned a concept that many believed not possible into a reality, one which is continuing to grow in scope. We have proven that we can adapt to environments outside the Earth, that we can work collaboratively to forge new futures for the benefit of all humankind, that choosing the Moon was the right choice.
Just over 1 year ago, we founded Argus 1 on the Moon. Today, our vision is real, and we now have a sustainable lunar farm. We live, work, and operate in facilities that protect us from dangerous micrometeor impacts and harmful solar radiation. We've built infrastructure from lunar soils and basalt rock, captured water from lunar poles, and harnessed the power of our sun to drive our technology. Our technology monitors and actively manages our activities from temperature, illumination and humidity control to plant health, crop yield, water and nutrient supply. We are collecting data, conducting experiments and publishing research on agricultural methods, cell cultures and insect breeding in microgravity environments. We are monitoring the health and well-being of our people on the Moon and comparing our findings to those known on Earth. Every day, we overcome challenges through innovation, engineering, and perseverance, creating safer lunar habitats to live and work in. Process, reuse, and source our precious lunar resources to support our long-term operational goals, and harvest safe, nutritious food to nourish our bodies and minds. Our international nature breaks down cultural barriers, uniting us in establishing a shared heritage and achieving a common objective to the benefit of all humankind. Argus 1, farming for the future.
You know, this is the first stage that's ever paid much attention to the future, which is a little ironic since we may not have one unless we become interplanetary.
Thank you. I'd like to acknowledge the support of our sponsor, 10 to the 9th Plus Foundation. That was our sponsor for this team project. And I'd also like to acknowledge the numerous other people that helped us and organisations that helped us both in our research and our presentation today. It's at this time I'd like to welcome our team, if they could join me on stage, and we will accept some questions from the assessors.
Looks like to pass the mic around between.
So if we have any questions that you'd like to ask our team.
So I really like the range of foods that you produced. I just wondered, in terms of the nutrients and soil, etc., I assume some food would be initially sent with the lunar farmers. So was that taken into account to add to the soil?
Good question.
And the effect on it?
Our initial assumption was that we would need to build our residential area and then set up the farm. Each of the bioreactor units, known as a human, would be providing the nitrogen for us in the form of urine and fecal matter. So we would have additional nitrogen from that source. And then once we got to the opportunity, had the 4 units put in, then we were looking at the closed loop at that point.
Okay, I guess I was also wondering about the micronutrients and other elements and compounds that we may not know about yet in the soil structure, or is that being tested?
So we did definitely look at the micronutrients that were needed for the soil. We did actually put a in our wider report that more research needs to go into the micronutrient composition of the lunar regolith, but we did consider the soil composition and what was therefore needed to be added to be able to grow the plants in the lunar regolith.
My name's Adrian. On top of that, we did recognise very quickly when we looked at the composition of the lunar regolith that a lot of the trace elements that exist on Earth are just nowhere to be found. So we knew very quickly that one of the most important things was to transport those trace elements with us. It's obviously going to be very expensive to do that, but there was no way around it, and because trace can be dehydrated, and you only need a very small amount of it in whether it's soil or cellular agriculture, we thought that was something that was definitely viable.
Did that answer your question? Yep. Do we have any other questions?
Very good presentation, thanks for that. What do you think the social impacts back on Earth would be if we did set up a permanent lunar base and do what you
So if we were to set up a lunar base, it would ultimately be the start of establishing a new enterprise in space, and it would expand opportunities here on Earth. I think the impact of what technologies that could be developed up there could actually be very positive, and ultimately introducing farming on the moon and establishing operations off-world for any enterprise, particularly farming, would bring a lot of benefit to humanity.
I think one of the interesting social impacts that we came up with was that potentially the lunar farm would actually start generating very different types of foods. And we thought, I don't think we put it in the report, but we were even thinking about things where these foods could come back to Earth, and selling them on Earth would actually be a larger revenue stream than even potentially possible than it would have been on the moon.
This is definitely intercultural. I like how you talked about the food aspects. I know when we've had discussions with other countries about closed cycle agriculture, for example, talking to the Japanese, they talk about rice, and Australians might talk about wheat. So you nailed it. I would have liked to have had a cricket to try, but I'm glad we didn't have any phosphorus recycled or nitrogen. You mentioned international, and you talked about the Moon Treaty. Now, not many people or a lot of countries aren't part of that. So how did you discuss that? Obviously, you know, it's a big part of this issue.
Sammy, you'd like to take that one? Thank you.
Hello, I'm Sammy. Great question. So we did consider both the Outer Space Treaty and the Moon Agreement, and because many nations have not signed the Moon Agreement, we thought about what ways it would be widely accepted. So one of the things that we researched and discovered that if the science and technology is shared with all of humanity, it would be one of the ways that we can circumvent the Moon Agreement. On top of that, we know for a fact that there are countries as recently as 2015, 2017 that have signed national laws that have been passed that allows their countries or allowed their citizens to mine the moon for in-situ resources and use that. So we feel like as long as no nation state claims any sort of sovereignty over any celestial body, it should be a viable option to do the farming.
Thanks, guys. So the mission statement that you've got talks about outlining a vision for agriculture. So my question, which there might be several different answers from the group, depending on your perspective, if we were to go on the path of implementing this vision, what do you see as the biggest hurdles that we're going to have to face? Right? What do we need to do before we can actually get to this?
That's a really good question. I think a lot of our groups, when they were doing their research, found that there just wasn't enough evidence or that certain techniques we were suggesting would be successful. I know when we were looking at the food supplies, there's been certain things that have been tested in microgravity on the ISS and in space shuttle missions. But over the times we're talking, to get that sustainability and that closed loop that is stable, there hasn't been a lot of programs. There has been some biospheres set up, and we investigated the results of those, and each had issues in setting them up. And if you're going to be that far away from help, you need to get those things right from the start. So we see sustainability on the moon as being a longer term thing, and we're certainly setting up a base that allows further research on the moon would be critical to the success of long-term farming.
I would like to add on to that. One thing is one is about the research what we need to do. Other one is that we have to, one of the easiest ways to do is to have a model of the plant, like simulate a mathematical model of the plant and see how it can perform. So that is one easy way to do the simulations. and with less cost. So research has to be carried out in that aspects also.
Did you come up against, sorry, follow-on question. Did you come up against any challenges that weren't technical, right? Because this is going to be an international kind of approach, right? Any thoughts on that?
So some from our human team.
Thank you. My name's Nate. I actually covered the psychological aspects of the endeavour, and that's something which we didn't really include too much in our final report because we were mainly looking at farming rather than the human psychological aspects of being on a settlement that's so far away from home. It's so foreign to us. There's so many risks all around us. It's a really extreme environment. But there are polar analogues which go into great detail about the psychological aspects of this type of endeavour or in an extreme environment. And that's something which isn't technical. It's something which requires constant monitoring. It's something which is dynamic. It can change from individual to individual. And it's also something which is reflected culturally as well. There have been studies around the cultural changes based on 30 days at a polar placement, and different cultural groups actually reported different changes in different psychological aspects. So some groups would report they would have an increase in anger. Other groups would report that they have an increase in depression. And there seemed to be that the group members, culturally at least, were experiencing similar psychological aspects. So I hope that answers part of your question.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. Thank you. That's enough from me.
I had two questions. The first one goes back to, with your food sources, did you consider something like algae that could be processed into a very boring food source, but as a backup plan that's possibly leads less intensive farming?
I think Adrian probably can answer that one pretty well.
That fell under the cellular agriculture section. So algae, when we were looking at the studies, they had done a lot of it on algae, but it as a food source, it became very boring very quickly, and was rejected by I think NASA and the astronauts after a while. Cellular agriculture has a lot of potential though. So we were talking, we started with cyanobacteria that you could change their code to actually start producing quantities of glucose, and that was very simple. All you needed was a source of carbon dioxide and sunlight, and you could go from something as simple as that to glucose, which could then feed a whole range of other type of cellular agriculture foods. We came up with one called cloudberries, and it was an analogue to fruit, but it's basically just, cellular mush. So you could put it into any sort of, shape that you wanted. From there, we went into mycoprotein, which was another potential fungi source as well, which you could turn into an analogue of protein. And then the highest level one was the meat, so cellular produced meat, but the technology wasn't there, and why we didn't integrate it straight away is because it would have been very resource intense and multiple steps, so we didn't have the industrial stack to produce anything like that in any sort of quantity probably within the first year. But you'd say long term, that's probably what would be the case. It would be cellular agriculture all the way. Woohoo. That was my section as well, which is why I'm so excited about it.
Oh, that's cool. And and my second question was based on expensive to get up there. Did you cost that out? And did you think of other revenue streams like live streaming your farms back to Earth?
I'll pass that over to Kate.
Thanks. Great question. So we costed the cost of transporting food up to the moon at roughly $1.2 million a kilo. If we assumed that it would drop a little bit down to $1 million a kilo, for 10 people, that would equate to $14.6 billion for an annual food supply. So basically, to make the farm feasible, the setup or the annual resupply costs would just have to be less than that alternative. So I think based on what the techniques and the materials that we've recommended, I think that's feasible.
Any more questions from the assessors? If there are no more questions, I'd like to give my team a round of applause for the excellent work they've done.
A round of applause for the entire team, please. I also thank you very much for all the assessors who have joined us today, and they're basically still working on their assessments, as you see, and then all the other audience who are either here or watching us online around the globe. Thank you very much for joining us. So I just want to close the session here. However, for the people who are in the room, I want to actually invite everyone on stage with the assessors to take a final group photo all together. And finally, for the ones who are watching us online, a quick announcement. So this is actually the last academic day of the program, which means we are closing. This was the final deliverable for the participants, and we are closing this session tomorrow. And tomorrow, 4 p.m. at a late time, and it's a very early morning for Europe, but we don't have our closing ceremony, and it will be live casted as well. So we also want to encourage everyone to see and watch the live cast tomorrow for the closing ceremony. Once again, thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day.